Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Western Spirit. Today, we have one of my favorites, as I was telling Ben before. Today, we have Ben Habib. He's the chairman of Great British Pact and so much more. And also, he's the former deputy leader of Reform UK. And Ben, as I said, you're one of my favorites. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Ariel. I'm flattered to be on your show and to receive the kind of introduction you've just given me. Thank you.
Well, I'll just say that, like you said, not a lot of Israelis know you. So I think it's important for people in Israel to know you because I think that you are one, at least from my point of view, one of the more intellectuals in the public sphere in the UK on the right. And I think it's important for people, Israelis like me, that are on center right of Israeli politics to get to know people like you. So it's my pleasure to highlight you. So let's get into, I guess, just from, I have to, for the protocol, ask you about what's happening in the UK in terms of Reform UK, because people in Israel, a lot of people on the right look at Reform UK, at least from afar, not knowing all the details, and say, oh, there's a party that maybe we can look to for examples, because people are, for example, disappointed in the Likud. People, they look to Reform UK, oh, it could work, and now we see that maybe it's not working. So maybe give us a little bit, because I know that it's not, I don't want it to be the, you're probably asked about this 100 times lately, so just get it out of the way.
Yeah, sure. So I think there are two or three problems with Reform UK that are causing it significant issues at the moment. The first is, and they all relate in one way or another to the leader, Nigel Farage. The first is that Nigel is a phenomenal character. He's a fantastic campaigner. He's larger than life. And with that comes obviously, the propensity to dominate the discussion, dominate the party. And that's all fine. But you do need a mechanism in any political party for other great people to be part of it, for their views to be heard, entertained, discussed, and for the best of the collective's view to go forward as party policy. Because no matter how good one individual is, you can't rest an entire political movement on one individual's shoulders. And Reform UK is effectively controlled by Nigel Farage, and there's no mechanism by which other views can be heard, no processes, checks and balances on Nigel. And it is a Nigel circus, if you like. And that makes it extremely challenging for anyone coming into it who has robust and justifiable, policy ideas and wishes to help the United Kingdom. So that's the first issue. Yeah.
Does that mean also one of the things that in Israel we have a lot of people, even though the Likud has primaries? I know you probably aren't that familiar with Israel. I just want to like understand if we can learn anything. People say Bibi is such a big, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, such a big personality, such a big character that anyone who during the years tried to, threaten him ideologically or, you know, philosophically or whatever, he was basically thrown out of the party. Is that basically the critique, that anyone who is against the leader is somehow going to be found himself outside of a job in the party?
Yeah, I don't know what the ownership structure of Likud is like, but with Reform, it's basically controlled by Nigel. There are legal mechanisms through which he controls it. It used to be that he was the majority shareholder. It now looks like he's not the majority shareholder, but in practice, he has control of the party. So he can just throw anyone out when he wishes to throw them out. And I think Benjamin Netanyahu, I'm sure he's a huge character. But if he exercises his political heft, he's doing it because he is a hefty political character. It's not because the structure allows him to do that. But in Nigel's case, he's not just a hefty political character. He also has a structure which just gives him the ability to throw anyone out. And, that's not good. You need to have a mechanism by which people like Rupert Lowe, who's been in the news recently, and myself can actually say to Nigel, this is what we think the party should be doing, and there should be some kind of obligation on Nigel to at least entertain the view, in good faith. But actually, given that he controls it, all you can do internally is plead with Nigel. Say, please, Nigel, please look at this. And if he, it's a bit like a Tudor court. You have to gain favor with the monarch. And if you don't gain favor with the monarch, And that's no way to run a political party, particularly one which bangs the drum for democracy.
I wanted to. That's. I want to. That's just get out of the way because you've been saying that in the British news. So I don't want because that's like old. It's like we could put on any TV station to watch it in the UK. What I do want to ask you is, and a lot of the people like me are wondering, in the last election, the UK, in very contrast to all of Europe, basically moved left. So all of Europe is moving right. We see it in Germany, we see it in Holland, we see it. We're going to see it in other places probably in the near future. Um, but the British people voted for the Labour government, and seems like in total opposite direction of the rest of Europe. Is that really what happened, or were the conservatives so like a pale version of the labor that there was like nothing else to do?
So the British people are not moving to the left. And by left, what I define as left nowadays is people who believe in global governance, governance through quangos, bureaucracies, legal mechanisms, which effectively damage democracy. That's how I see the left. And what people call colloquially the right, I see that as people who believe in their nation state, believe in borders, believe in sovereignty, believe in elected representatives being held to account. That's the split at the moment in UK politics. And the British people are very much on the colloquial right. But the reason we got a Labour government is because the British people voted in 2016 to leave the European Union. They didn't get it. They voted again for Boris Johnson in 2019 to leave the European Union. He didn't do it. I know we've notionally left the EU, but actually we've hitched ourselves at the hip with the European Union. From a regulatory, taxation, governance perspective, we're still running the same kind of EU model of government that the people of this country wish to ditch. And we have open borders, as you probably are aware. We can't stop illegal migrants coming into the country. We're being overwhelmed by mass legal migration. And we're not, and so the British people are just absolutely fed up with the way the government has been not failing to represent their votes, failing to be right wing, colloquially right wing. And and so what we see actually is not a victory for Labour, but a loss for the Conservative Party. So just to give you the numbers on it, in 2019, the Labour Party got 10.3 million votes, and it lost that election to Boris Johnson, who I'm going by memory, but I think he got about 13.8 million votes. So Labour got 10.3, Boris Johnson got 13.8. This time round in 2024, Labour got 9.7 million votes. So it lost 600,000 votes compared to 2019. Um, but there was obviously Reform was standing. They got 4 million votes. And the Tory party, the Conservative Party, got just over 6 million. So if you put the Tory vote with the Reform vote, you get more than what Labour got. But the real takeaway from that actually is one, the Labour Party didn't win the election. It's the right wing that lost the election. And and the other thing is there's a massive reduction in turnout. Turnout in 2019 was 67.5%. Turnout in 2024 was 59.5%. That's a huge collapse. And that is because the British people have repeatedly been promised things that they haven't then had delivered. And there was a voter strike, a vote of despondency. So they didn't go out to vote. But I am absolutely certain that the mood of the British people is like the United States when they voted for Trump, like Germany, which wants to go back to believing in a proud sovereign Germany, and frankly the French and most of Europe wants borders, wants their countries to be protected. Want their countries to be protected. It's an anomaly of our voting system and the way the numbers worked in 2024 that returned this Labour government.
And Ben, one of the things that I just want to maybe share with you and get your perspective, like 2 months before the election in the US, I went to visit my father who still lives in New York. And I was walking around New York and I did not see one American flag in Manhattan. I didn't see, and this was before Trump was voted in. So they had reason to be proud about America. Their guy was in office. And I walked by Columbia University and we saw the encampments there. the anti pro Hamas encampments, and we were walking. We saw in Union Square Park like anti-American protests even, and I thought to myself, if we drove out of Manhattan about a half hour away, we would find tons of American flags, people who are proud to be American, people who want illegal immigration to stop, people who want America to be, I hate to use it, great again. And I wanted to ask if it's the same thing in the UK, where you'll have a sort of bubble in the big cities where people think, they want to be very multicultural. They want all these illegal immigrants to come in. They feel almost ashamed to be British. And then when you go a little bit outside, everybody wants to be part of this big British UK experiment. Is that something that we can look at both countries a little bit similarly?
That is exactly the same in the UK. We have an urban population that is more multicultural than our suburban and rural population. And they are fully embracing the diversity, equity, and inclusion regulatory regime, which is obviously also a cultural regime. And and part of that, comes back to the way I was defining left and right. These people don't believe in the UK. They believe all humanity is equal. All humanity should get the same rights in the UK, even if they're not British citizens. And so they see a belief in citizenry, a belief in the nation state, as being in opposition to their ideological view. And so they want to set aside the nation state. So you won't see so many Union flags in London, but you will see Union flags in villages and towns across the United Kingdom. And what we've got to do on the colloquial right is to re-energize a belief in our country, because our country is a great country, and we've got a very proud history which informs us about the way we should behave on the international stage, not to become integrated with other countries, but to meet other countries as a proud, independent, sovereign nation, cooperating by all means for the benefit of global betterment, but putting our own citizens' interests first and making policies for the British national interest and the British people. And we've lost sight of that. In the pursuit of being nice, we're destroying our country.
And on that note, one of the things that I realized after October 7th, when all these protests started, is that a lot of people on the sort of progressive left have trouble to admit or to say, or they'll say it's racist if you say that some cultures are not as good as our culture. So, for example, cultures that are coming into Western, people from certain cultures that are, they treat women in certain ways, or they're very, um, underage marriage or different stuff like that. Even just the way people act, it's culturally appropriate in some places, but that's not the way we would want. And after October 7th, I remember people saying, if we just give them everything we want, they'll leave us alone, they'll be so nice to us, it has to be all your problem. And no, there's some cultures that just want to kill us.
I mean, there are cultures that are antipathetic to our values, absolutely. But I take a much simpler approach, if you don't mind me saying. I just take the view that, look, this is the United Kingdom. Our national heroes are people like Nelson, Winston Churchill, Lord Wellington, and so on. I'm proud of our national heroes. I'm proud of the British imperial past that we had. I am informed by our great history, and our history is our culture, isn't it? Our history gives us our present understanding of who we are. And I'm proud of that culture. I'm proud of who we are. And if you come to my country, if you come to our country, you better buy into those values and that culture. If you don't buy into it, if you don't really believe it, if you don't love it, if you don't see Winston Churchill as a national hero, then actually you shouldn't really be in this country. I take quite a black and white view. And so I don't care which cultures they come from. But of course, you're right. If you come from rural Afghanistan, you're likely to be, you know, not aligned with the way we think. And, we've spent the last 100 odd years emancipating women. And we've now got, in the pursuit of liberty, in the ostensible pursuit of liberty, we're allowing women to wear niqabs, if you know what I mean by a niqab, on the streets of London. We spent a couple of hundred years, emancipating women, removing the veil, if you like, metaphorically and physically from women, to allow them to come forth and be equal members of society. And now, in the pursuit of liberalism, we're shutting women down again. And it's a most bizarre thing that liberalism, taken to its nth degree, I moved the debate on a bit, but liberalism taken to its nth degree is actually the removal of people's rights. It becomes dictatorial, and it becomes cancel culture and end of freedom of speech because you can't challenge liberalism, etc. And so we've got a really bad direction of travel, and we've got to find our roots again. We've got to find our soul in the United Kingdom.
And Ben, one thing about the United Kingdom, which I have friends that moved to Israel in the last year from the UK, and some of them said to me they were afraid on, for example, Saturdays to walk around certain areas of London. Is that something that is do you think it's a valid point? Do you think that in the UK it's become more and more dangerous for Jews?
It's more dangerous for Jews. It's more dangerous for everyone. We are seeing crime. Crime is through the roof. So part of this liberal attitude, Ariel, is that criminals are being afforded greater concern. Their rights are almost, I wouldn't say superior to the victim, but the victim has the burden of proof that they've been abused, and the criminal is given all the protection they need. You would have followed, for example, the gang rape gangs that have been taking place in the United Kingdom, and how our police, our social services, our medical professions, local authorities turned a blind eye to it because they didn't want to challenge that which might then result in them being accused of being prejudiced in any shape or form. So even the criminal justice system, in the pursuit of DEI and the pursuit of political correctitude, is being set aside. And we are getting greater criminality across the board. And criminals are therefore being afforded protection rather than the victim. It's absolute craziness that we've got going on. And we do have a two-tier criminal justice system in the United Kingdom. We've got a sentencing council which proposed over a year ago, but it's found its way into the public debate this year. Over a year ago, they proposed that sentencing should be different depending on which ethnic minority you're from. Now, justice should be blind. So, Lady Justice above the Old Bailey, if you know what I mean, is blindfolded. Our High Court in London, she's blindfolded, and she's blindfolded because she's meant to dispense justice blindly. It doesn't matter who you are, what your background is. But we're now getting creeping undermining of our judicial system based on this whole DEI thing, which again is part of this liberal global order, promoting minorities over and above and to the detriment of the majority. And when you have a criminal justice system that is hijacked, well, I mean, the country's in deep trouble, isn't it?
Yes. And Ben, one of the things that we keep that in Israel, at least, I know that it's not, people in the UK are trying to save the UK, but in Israel, we look at with the conservatives, with all of their problems, and they had a lot of problems, at least they seem to be our friends. Now we see, and I think this has to do a lot with, first of all, you had, I think, 5 or 6 MPs that were elected just on Gaza in certain districts, right? And yes, and you also have the labor parts of, like, the more radical parts of the labor, party, that are really hateful of us, no matter even what we do. Do we have are you worried that, or should we be worried that the UK won't stand with us for long?
Well, I think if the UK ceases to stand with Israel, it's going to find itself at sea. Even Starmer, whatever his internal pathetic compass that he has is informing him. I think he will stand with Israel because he's got to understand where his enemies are. And Israel is an ally of the United Kingdom. So I hope the day will never come where you see the United Kingdom turning its back on Israel. That would be a very, very sad day.
Yeah. But we should. So I guess my next question is demography. Douglas Murray told me once, demography is destiny. I think it's not him, but the UK is changing demographically also because the Brits, I think, do not have a lot of children, and you have a lot of these immigrants coming in from all over the world. Does the UK have a future? I mean, it's what I've been asking a lot of people. The demography of the UK has been changing so rapidly and so fast, and in such in a a large degree. Are you worried that there might not be a country to save in a decade or so?
I am worried. I think that we are knocking at the last opportunity to save our country. And I don't think we're alone. I think Western civilization faces the same problem. And the liberal global order, people like Biden, Trudeau, von der Leyen, Schultz, Macron, Starmer, Boris Johnson. They're all part of the problem. We need governments across the West which believe in their country and understand that in order to remain a country, to remain a society, to remain a nation state, you have to have an integrated culture. And you've got to be proud of your country. If you're not proud of your country, if you're not proud of your history, you cannot believe in your country. If you cease to believe in your country ceases to exist. And it's as simple as that. And the history that we teach our children is that, we're bad people. We say all our riches came from the slave trade. They don't teach them about the terrific agrarian revolution, industrial revolution, the terrific British common law that we established, our terrific pioneers who went forth and colonized places and educated people, built railways, built schools, established legal systems. We've got such a rich tapestry behind us. Perhaps without wishing to in any way denigrate Israel or any other country, perhaps we've got one of the richest historical, cultural tapestries in the world. And yet we trash ourselves all the time, and it's got to stop. We've got to be proud of who we are. I'm bloody proud of who we are. But, I seem to be in a minority. Yeah.
Yes, it's very depressing, I think. Just even as someone who's not British or someone who's not, I guess, not anymore American, I think that as part of Western tradition, we should all be proud of where countries where we come from. Why are you there if you're not proud of where you are? And let me just ask you one last thing. So before we finish, because I know both of our times is short, JD Vance gave a speech in I think, the Munich Security Conference not too long ago, and he basically went after an amazing speech also because of the audience reaction. I think they were they didn't know how to like what are we supposed to do here? So in his speech, he went after the UK because of the way, for example, free speech in the UK, and he basically said that people are being arrested for things that they're saying, um, and he gave different examples, and people went after him, and I think you were like one of the only ones that I saw on mainstream British TV say, no, he's right, he has a good point here. And is it are you worried that, for example, if it is true that people are being arrested for saying or fined for saying things, are you worried that you'll be arrested for or fined for saying things?
I mean, it's quite possible I'll be arrested. People are arrested for what they say. We've had journalists arrested for saying pretty innocuous things. I don't know if you're familiar with Alison Pearson. She wrote, yeah, great. She's a lovely lady, absolutely sound of mind. And she tweeted something after 7th October 2023, which I think wasn't quite right. She got some facts wrong or something. She deleted the tweet. A year later, she had the police turn up at her doorstep and question her on what we call a non-crime hate incident. A non-crime hate incident. That's basically shutting down free speech. And we have something like 13,000 of these incidents every year, including targeting 9-year-old children, I think is the youngest that's been targeted, for what they say at school. The whole point about going to school and being educated is to say nasty things to each other. Or not the whole point. That's part of the point. Learning to be robust, challenging each other, debating and formulating your own view of life. And we're shutting it all down. So we're indoctrinating our children. We're trying to indoctrinate society. And this is part of the extreme liberalism that I referred to earlier in our conversation.
Yeah, and also, I think it shows that they're not confident in their opinions, because if they were confident, they would be able to defend them on the merits. Instead, they shut everyone up who even, and which is, they call themselves progressive. It's like ridiculous. They're regressive in every single way. They're just regressing our society. We're going back to all these animal instincts, taking all the enlightenment out of our lives, everything that we learned, the personal freedoms, the difference between men and women, all these basic things that are okay. We're just throwing it all out. And Ben, I wanted to say that you are, I think people in Israel and even in the UK should know that, Ben, you are one of the people that is, I think a lot of times people are very apologetic for opinions like yours, and I don't like that. It reminds me when George W. Bush was president and he said, "I'm not a conservative, I'm a compassionate conservative." So he was apologizing. He was well, other conservatives are not compassionate. I'm the one that's compassionate. And so I think people like you who are able to say that the as they things as they see them without apologizing for what you believe in is something that I really appreciated. And I wanted to say that how I thank you for being with me and for being who you are and standing up for your beliefs.